Are we on? Yes. Oh, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. and Mrs. Burlington, I prefer to say. I'm certainly happy that you're with us tonight. We have a very, very special guest, someone who is going to be involved, I'm sure is going to be involved in state government in the near future, one way or another. Very strong candidate, and I'm very, very pleased. And before I mention that, I just want to say that Larry is on this panel with me, Larry Way. I'm Pat Marino. And the guest that we have is this gentleman right here. To our right, Dan Shores, who is running for Attorney General and doing a spectacular job. And we've been sitting here just talking to him about some of the issues, and I'm sure he's going to let you know about how he feels with regard to some of the big issues. Larry's loaded up with questions. I have some, and Dan is all primed and ready to go. I have to just mention parenthetically that I was happy to find out that Dan comes from a little town, a beautiful little town on the South Shore, which I encourage all of you to visit if you ever have time. It's Carver, where the cranberries come from. I taught there. Dan was a student there, and he lives nearby there, and he knows it very, very well. Dan, welcome.
Thank you, Pat. It's great to be here.
I'd like to have you say just a few words with regard to who you are and where you come. Go ahead.
Yep, sure, absolutely. Yep. So my name is Dan Shores, and I'm a Republican candidate for the office of Attorney General here in Massachusetts. I grew up on the South Shore. I grew up in Weymouth, and I grew up in a small town called Carver, as Pat mentioned. And I'm from a hardworking, working class family, blue collar family. My dad was a teacher, chemistry teacher, and then turned logger. He had a logging company down in southeastern Massachusetts where there's an abundance of white pine. He started a logging business where he would purchase the large growth white pine off of landowners' properties, go in with a crew of people, drop the trees, limb them, skid them out of the woods, buck them up at the landing, and then bring them over with a cherry picker, bring them over to the mill, and he sold the wood. And during the time that his business was starting to really get going, that's when I was in my late teenage years and into my college years, and it served as a great source of income for me because I worked with my dad in the woods and helped him with his business and also earned a good hourly wage. And so I'm from a blue collar background, a hardworking background, and that's something that has served me very well throughout my life. I went on and I put myself through college. I'm a graduate of UNH. I have a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of New Hampshire, and then I'm also I also attended law school. I put myself through law school. I'm a graduate of the Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C. I was a member of the Law Review at Georgetown, and I was a member of the editorial board of the Law Review at Georgetown, and I worked in D.C. for about 13 years. I was down there, and in 2014, I moved back home to Massachusetts. I ran for Congress in the 9th Congressional District for the 2014 race. I fell short in the campaign in terms of the primary, but I like to say I won the race because I met my wife Lindsay during the campaign, and we now live in Hingham, and we both work in Boston. I founded a law practice in Boston. My wife works in marketing in Boston. She was a teacher, and now when this race came around, I looked very closely at what this office was, how our present Attorney General has been acting in office, what the conduct of the Attorney General in office, and so I began to assess the race pretty closely, and here I am running for Attorney General.
Good for you, and welcome.
Thank you.
Larry, do you want to
If I could, this is certainly an interesting time we're living in. So I think the office of Attorney General in the state's a very important race to be watched. There's so many big legal issues, as well as criticisms of the current Attorney General, that I think this race is extremely important, much more so than other years.
I agree.
If I could ask you, what was your interest in becoming Attorney General of Massachusetts? And also, were there any concerns or interests in the state of Massachusetts that has caused you to want to run and seek this office?
Well, first of all, as someone who loves Massachusetts with all my heart and soul, I love all the people in Massachusetts. It's my home, and it's so I care about the people of Massachusetts. That's really the primary drivers. I care about the people of Massachusetts.
So what is it you'd like to do for the people of Massachusetts?
So what we have now, with the Office of Attorney General, it's supposed to be our chief, our Attorney General is supposed to be our chief lawyer and our chief law enforcement official, our number one lawyer, our standard bearer for the law. And as taxpayers, we provide $45 million each year. This coming year, it'll probably be higher than that, $48 million of hard-earned taxpayer dollars into that office. And we do that to ensure that our laws are enforced and our people are protected. What this Attorney General has done since she's been in office is, when I began to analyze what she's done while in office, it really shocked me. I was appalled, frankly, as a citizen, as an attorney. This Attorney General has politicized the office beyond recognition. And so I'm a reform candidate. So I've come to get politics out of the Office of Attorney General, to return it to its true purpose, and that's to enforce our laws to protect the people of Massachusetts. That's why I'm running for Attorney General.
Could you tell us how the office has been politicized? How was that accomplished by Moore Healey, or has it gone back since before Moore?
Well, there hasn't been a single party. The Democrat Party has controlled the Attorney General's office for 50 years. Elliot Richardson was the last Republican Attorney General to serve in that office. So now, over the course of time, we've certainly had some very strong attorney generals that have served in the office. But over the last couple cycles, we've seen a shift towards using the office to advance politics and not the law. And this particular Attorney General, A.G. Healey, has really sort of broken all the records. I mean, we're talking 30 to 40 lawsuits against the present administration, the White House. 0 lawsuits against the Obama administration. 30 to 40 lawsuits against Trump. So I don't. It doesn't matter. It's not about politics. I mean, any common sense person will look at that and recognize that our taxpayer dollars are being used for political purposes. And I don't care what party you're a member of. That's wrong.
It is.
And so we need to get politics out of that office to return that instrumentality to serve the people of Massachusetts. And I mean, God, 30, 40 lawsuits. As a litigator, I understand a single lawsuit requires a tremendous amount of resources to just file a single brief.
Right.
And to all the resources it's really heartbreaking, to be quite honest with you, to watch all those resources to be focused on politics. Meanwhile, we have opioid dealers that are, so every lawsuit that's filed against the White House, that's one more fentanyl dealer that goes free, and that's someone who's putting that poison onto our streets and in the vicinity of our children.
Yeah.
And so we need to refocus our priorities, get back to basics, use taxpayer dollars properly to enforce our laws, and forget about the politics.
Yeah.
So to understand you to be saying that Moore Healey is ignoring the opioid crisis in favor of pursuing a political agenda through the courts.
I would say that, there are certainly some things that the Attorney General in the Attorney General's office has done to help with respect to opioids. It's a raging crisis that we have. But what I'm saying is, it's a matter of priorities. To me, it's like a house on fire. Like, this is something that we can win. This is something that we can defeat. And so while we're sitting here and it's the scourge of our time, our Attorney General, our chief lawyer, and our chief law enforcement official should be using all of the resources at the person's disposal to address that problem and confront that problem. So while there might be great press releases, and there might be programs, and there might be a lot of talk and a lot of hand-waving about confronting this issue, we really need to roll up our sleeves and actually fix the problem. And that's what I will provide as the next Attorney General. This Attorney General is a lot of talk, weak on crime. I will be tough on crime and get the job done.
I think we could agree on that as far as her being a little bit weak on the opioid crisis, could be doing a lot more. What is it, Dan, that you would do to help resolve the issue, at least from a legal perspective? I know it's a multifaceted problem.
It
that
is.
needs to be solved in many different facets, but what would you
It
do
does. So
as the chief law enforcer?
I agree with you 100%. So when you look to solve this problem, I look at it as a three-pronged problem. First, it's solution, I should say, education. These drugs, it's not a keg party in the 1980s, an underage drinking situation. We're talking about one strike and you could be out with these drugs.
Right.
And when I say out, it's a hugely high addictive rate. So you could be addicted the rest of your life by one use, or you could die. And so we need to educate our kids. We need to go full court press, educate our children, never open that door in the first place. Don't go down that road. So prevention. Now the AG's office can play a role there. There are, funding can be provided, resources can be provided from the budget in the AG's office to get into the schools and to address that problem. The AG's office can assist there. The other prong, the second prong is treatment. And similarly, if you fall in that trap in the first place, the people that are suffering, the people that have fallen in that trap, they need access to the proper health care, to recovery, to get back on the street, to get back on their feet, to get back with their families. And the AG's office can play a role there in terms of directing to resources and education and maybe some funding as well. But the fundamental, the most important thing that the Attorney General's office can do, that's to crack down on these drug traffickers with the full force and weight of the law. That's what the Attorney General's role is as our chief lawyer and our chief law enforcement official. This Attorney General is weak on crime. This Attorney General believes in giving a break, and these are her words, a safety valve to drug dealers when sitting before a judge. This is on a letter from August 2017. It was signed by this Attorney General that drug dealers should have a, quote, safety valve when before a judge to bypass mandatory minimum sentencing law. What about now, are we going to have sympathy for people who profit of putting this poison into our streets? Or are we going to sympathize with the real victims and punish those who do these wrongful deeds? And I'm on the side of obviously being tough on crime, and that's what we need from our Attorney General. I don't know how you can be our chief lawyer and chief law enforcement official and not hold that position. That's why I'm running for Attorney General. It's a much better alternative than we have now.
If, just to run a little bit more with that, I heard today, I think I had mentioned earlier, that there is a lot of talk now with regard to prosecuting and taking the life of a dealer if that person, if it's known that that person has taken the life of citizens. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's too strong, or do you think it's if it's caused the death of if a dealer has caused the death of a person, any person, should they be convicted and should their life be taken?
It's very simple, okay? If you are in the business of putting poison into the streets,
Right.
and that poison that you put into the streets causes a death, then you have caused a death, okay? So the penalties need to fit the crime. And whether that's the scale of the penalty, from manslaughter to the death penalty, however you want to, whatever gradient that falls in, second degree murder, whatever the case, that's something I think for the legislature.
Right.
But I would look at that and decide, there would be varying circumstances, I would imagine. But whatever the case, if you cause a death, then you need to be held accountable, equally accountable for that.
I agree.
Yeah, and it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So just be a little more clear with me, just because it was just new information for me, that Maura Healey feels like we should give more leniency to dealers
Yes.
who put the drugs into the street.
Yes.
She doesn't believe it's your product, so it's your responsibility. but she feels that, well, we need to understand the dealers.
Okay, so just be specific. What I was referring to earlier was there's a mandatory minimum sentencing law, which is if you ask most of the district attorneys, they'll tell you it's an invaluable tool to get the drug dealers to go after the drug dealers. If there's a lower level drug dealer, they use that to negotiate up to the higher level drug dealer, because certain drug dealing offenses carry a mandatory minimum sentencing set by the legislature. What this Attorney General supports is giving a safety valve to a dealer who's before a judge, where the judge can bypass mandatory minimum sentencing law, and to give the drug dealers a break, basically. And that's the wrong-headed approach, especially from our Attorney General. If you're a member of the legislature, if you're a politician and you're advocating a left-wing viewpoint or a right-wing viewpoint, or however, if you're looking at it from that perspective, then I can see someone advocating in that manner, because we have a free society and people are going to argue. But if you're the Attorney General,
Yes.
you can't be advocating for laws that protect individuals who deal drugs and hurt our kids and our people in our Commonwealth. It's that simple.
You accept the law and enforce it the way it should be.
And enforce the law.
Yeah.
And this Attorney General has had serious issues with law enforcement across the board.
How do you feel about, I can almost guess, but I'm going to ask anyway, how do you feel about sanctuary cities and the whole concept of sanctuary cities?
I am flatly against sanctuary cities. I'm against Massachusetts becoming a sanctuary state. The sitting Attorney General believes that Massachusetts should be a sanctuary state. The sitting Attorney General believes that Massachusetts should have sanctuary cities. And again, I go back to this very simple concept, which it defies common sense. Our chief lawyer and our chief law enforcement official is supposed to stand for the law. So how can you be the chief lawyer and the chief law enforcement official and believe in something and support something that's against federal law?
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. And so I think the more that people understand what our chief lawyer stands for, I think the more that they're going to be looking for an alternative, and I am that alternative.
And you know, the more people come in contact with real people who are dying from this problem, I think their opinions are going to be changing, even between now and November. I mean, the number of people that we just come in contact with in the last week, you know, it's much more than I thought it was. So if real people are dying from this issue, then I think people's opinions are already starting to change regarding the dealing. That being said, now, what was your opinion about Trump coming out against the sanctuary city of Lawrence, saying that has allowed drugs to flow through Lawrence and be distributed in New Hampshire?
I mean, we all understand that the president has, makes comments that stir a lot of publicity, and this is no different, right? So,
I realize
but it brings awareness, right? And I think some people, it turns some people off, and whatever the case may be. My campaign's not about politics; it's about the law, and so, but it does stir this conversation. And when you look at the facts, that's something that I think needs to be more closely looked at, in the sense of, if there are, and here's the other part about it. We talk about states. We talk about states that neighbor each other, and this goes to the illegal immigration issue as well. Really, borders, what your neighbor does has a direct effect on what you do. And so I think when you have a culture where your laws are not being consistently enforced at the local level and the city level, and you're saying to everybody else, well, we have control over this on a local level, you have to remember that those, the wrongdoings that happen inside your city walls have an effect on other people. So I think across the board, whether it's President Trump saying something, whether it's a law enforcement person saying something, it's about enforcing our laws. It comes down to, we are a nation of laws, we're a state of laws, and we need to be enforcing our laws, especially with respect to our drug dealers.
Well, Dean, I think the other aspect of it was, it's the first time I heard anybody link sanctuary cities with the drug problem, with allowing the drug to be more freely distributed in a sanctuary city.
Yeah, that's interesting, and like it sort of folds into what I was saying, which is, you know, if you're supporting a local regime that looks the other way on one law, then by extension, it's going to look the other way on other laws that people just don't want to follow or don't want to enforce. And I think that's wrong. I think it's dangerous. I think it's not a political issue. It's a public safety issue. And that is in the central purview of the Office of Attorney General. And so that needs to be, that's why I say it needs to be closely looked at. I'm not going to jump on a political story of the day or a political issue. I want to look at the facts. So you tell me that President Trump says that, and in my mind I say, okay, well, is it true what he said? And let's look at the facts. Let's look at, is that true? Is it true that the sanctuary city environment is causing folks to look the other way? I'd want to know the facts before I were to substantively comment from a policy perspective on what the analysis is. But it wouldn't surprise me, and I think if you have, it goes top down. I mean, let's talk about it. Now, this is one of the reasons why I moved back to Massachusetts from Washington, D.C., and I ran for Congress, and that was during the Obama administration. It really troubled me what I saw during the course of the Obama administration, including the consistent undermining of law enforcement. From the very first year, remember the Cambridge police acted stupidly? Do you remember that? The beer summit?
Yep.
All the way through the presidency, Ferguson, Attorney General Holder, it was a consistent undermining of law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it comes from the top down. And so what I'm offering the people of Massachusetts is an Attorney General who's going to be a standard bearer for the law. Let the politicians say what they want and do what they want, but as the Attorney General, I will be a standard bearer for the law. That I can guarantee the people of Massachusetts, and it stands in stark contrast to what we have now, which is a politician using the office to advance in a political agenda in her own career. And I think that's wrong. And I think people during this campaign are going to find out about that.
Very good. Are there other areas where you feel there may be some corruption on the part of our current Attorney General, that she's let other areas slide, maybe intentionally or maybe other nefarious reasons, maybe part of corruption?
I don't have direct facts that would support, I don't know. I mean, the thing that's interesting is that, but a lot of people don't know because the Attorney General's office is pretty much a black box. I mean, to get information, a FOIA request in public, they're often not responded to for reasons, some legitimate privilege and whatnot, but then it's just, so no one really knows what's going on. And it's interesting that, it's been in the hands of a single party for 50 years. I wonder what is in that office. I mean, I think the public deserves to know, but I will say that that what concerned me and what hasn't received press, a significant amount of press, is that we had a big drug lab scandal. I don't know if you recall.
Yes.
There were two scandals, and one of the scandals was Dukan, and then Farrak. Okay, and so Dukan was the first one that was exposed, and then the Farrak Amherst drug lab case had Farrak, who was a chemist, who handled the evidence for drug cases, and was found to have been using the drugs that was supposed to be being held in, that she was supposed to be a custodian for.
Right.
And so this evidence was known to the Attorney General's office, but they didn't provide that information during cases. And this came out during litigation. And the Attorney General's office did not provide that information to the judge. And so this came out, and the sitting attorney, this was in the Martha Coakley's administration, but then when the sitting Attorney General was involved, she supported a report that whitewashed the conduct of her assistant attorney generals, whitewashed that conduct, said, Well, it was in coordination with some other folks but there was no misconduct by the Attorney General's office. A few months later, what did the judge find? Not only was there misconduct, the misconduct went to a level that constituted fraud upon the court. So the Attorney General's office, on the one hand, you have the sitting Attorney General saying there was no misconduct, zero misconduct, no misconduct. And on the other hand, a judge objectively looking at the evidence saying it wasn't just misconduct, it was fraud upon the court. And guess what happened at the end of 2017? 8,000 drug dealer convictions were overturned. So 8,000 drug dealers were either set free or their convictions were overturned. That happened during the holidays, during a period where the press isn't very active. I tell this story on the campaign trail. The Boston press, the press does not talk about it. It took Rolling Stone magazine in January of this year to come out with a 20-plus page article on it, but this is from a news source that's outside the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So it really surprised me. And this story's not over. You're going to see later this year, I think that later this year, there'll be other drug dealer convictions being overturned. And I think it's,
For that same reason?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because because we could get into the with prejudice, the issues of whether a judge, there was done with prejudice. So the dismissals were with prejudice. And when it's with prejudice, that means that it's done. I mean, it's the dismissal. There's no more case. It's over. And the reason why is because the fraud that the Attorney General's office committed on the court. That's the basis for the with prejudice holding. And
it amazes me at how easily the office can be politicized. I mean, there are just so many issues that come up, and as you indicated, 50 years of the Democratic Party. I'm sure that if we had the time and the resources, we would go back and would find a lot of instances where convictions were not made or were made with politically. They're shaded politically. I'm wondering, can you tell me something about the setup of the AG's office in general? How do they get their information? Is it, you just have so many lawyers that are working that keep their eye peeled, or do they wait for someone to call in and say, this is not right, I want you to look into it? Or is it a little bit of everything? There are so many different areas. You're covering just about everything, literally. So it's just amazing.
Well, there's certainly, it's a large organization, a very large. Now, I have not worked in the Attorney General's office, so I'm an outsider that would be coming in to reform the office, which is a very good thing.
Yes.
But my understanding, based on the information I have and the folks that I know that have worked there, is it's a very large, bureaucracy and organization. It's got a couple hundred attorneys. Couple of hundred attorneys.
Wow.
And they are focused on, there are a number of bureaus that the Attorney General's office has. They focus on different areas like fraud, consumer fraud, public corruption, criminal, civil. There's different areas of focus, and then the resources of the office, and depending on what the leadership directs it toward, are focused on those different areas. And as I was saying before, it seems that over the last year, a major direction and resource use of the Attorney General's office has been used toward suing an individual, suing the White House.
Yeah.
And and that's why I say, so it's a priorities question. If you really care about the people of Massachusetts, if you really care about our kids, our next generation, and the people that are suffering, particularly with the opioid crisis, but also our seniors who are being defrauded by fraudulent phone schemes, taking advantage. If you really care about those people, you would stop suing, putting these frivolous, politically motivated lawsuits. You would take your people who are working on those lawsuits and you would turn them, and you would try to get some of these drug dealers off the streets. You would turn them to try to uncover some of these senior fraud situations. That's what we need, somebody with leadership that will go in there and direct the resources for the people of Massachusetts. And that's something that we deserve that.
Yeah.
We deserve that. We deserve better than what we have. And if this particular Attorney General wants to run for another office, then that's what I suggest happens, a political office. But as Attorney General, we need to help our people right here in Massachusetts and stop focusing on politically motivated lawsuits. Now, to be fair, as someone who would advocate for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts tooth and nail, if President Trump or President Obama or another president, Democrat, Republican, does something wrong that directly affects the people of Massachusetts and hurts the people of Massachusetts, and I think we can win, or we have a significant chance of winning, then you're damn right. I'm gonna stick up for Massachusetts, and I'm gonna fight for Massachusetts. So it's not, but to file 35 or 40 lawsuits, and then this past weekend to have a sign at a St. Patrick's Day event that this Attorney General did, have a sign that says it's been 9 days since we've sued Trump. Very cavalier. I mean, that's unbelievable. I think it's just wrong. It's just wrong, and we deserve so much better. It's pure politics.
Yeah.
And it's not personal. It's about doing what's right for the people of Massachusetts. We deserve an Attorney General who will fight for the people of Massachusetts, who will enforce our laws. That's my product. That's what I'm offering to you. And so I ask for your support and ask for your vote during this campaign.
You started mentioning some other issues like with the elderly. What is happening in that arena that could be bettered?
Well, I mean, the elderly, and I know I lived on Cape Cod for a few years. It's a high elderly population. That's a big part of the congressional district that I sought to represent. And there's a vulnerability there because you're in the golden years, and you've enjoyed your life and your family, and you feel like you should be protected. But meanwhile, we have these fraudulent phone schemes. We all know, we all get these calls. It's almost like no one's watching what's going on because we're consistently being bombarded by these phony schemes that says, you've won something, or call this number, or someone that lies and says, we want to refund this to you. Can we have your credit card information? Anything that would an innocent sweet older woman or older man might fall into and then just get ripped off. And so we need to protect those people. And so there are many examples of it. But that's something that's what the Attorney General is supposed to be doing. That's those types of things. So.
And we need an Attorney General who will pay attention to those things, because it's coming by phone, by mail, even email to seniors.
Email, phone. Across the board, mail, exactly.
And they know they could be more forgetful, so if somebody tells them that you owe $500 in taxes, please pay as soon as you can at this address, to send it to this address.
Exactly.
They're more likely to do it than to try and remember what it's all about, or to try and just figure it all out. Are there any other areas that come to mind that you feel need to be addressed, that you would like to be addressing?
Yes.
As Attorney General?
Yes, absolutely. One of the central purviews and responsibilities of the Attorney General's office is to root out public corruption. Root out public corruption wherever it may exist, okay? That's what I will do as the next Attorney General. This Attorney General has not brought any major public corruption case since she has been in office. And I ask on the stump, I say, are we led to believe that Massachusetts is so clean and uncorrupt as the sitting Attorney General appears to believe? I don't think so. And then when I ask that question, it evokes laughter, because we all know that that's just not the case. And so I can tell you, someone like myself, me, I am the last person that the folks on Beacon Hill want to be serving as Attorney General, because let me tell you something. If I get a file that comes and shows that there's public corruption, that it will be investigated to the full extent of the law. And I can tell you, and we put out press releases on this, with respect to the Stan Rosenberg scandal, this Attorney General has said that there's an investigation being conducted on the sexual harassment issues, but we haven't seen anything really substantive come out. Nothing. There's no result. And there's been zero talk about the corruption aspect, whereas Mr. Senator Rosenberg's husband had access to confidential information from Senator Rosenberg and used that to lobby state government. Now that is a crime,
Yes.
and it's corruption. It involves the senator. It involves, but we haven't heard a word about that, and so it's striking. But it's not surprising when you have one party rule, when you have a single party controlling most of the levers of government, and they have the attorney general who's supposed to be holding them on check. That's part of the whole package, the whole regime. And I think it's fundamentally wrong. And that's why it's time for a change. It's time to change up, reform that office, get a fresh look in there, outsider. And by the way, I don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican. A Republican, doesn't matter, independent. If you're committing an act of corruption, you're going to have a very serious problem if I'm the next Attorney General.
I agree with you. I think it is well beyond the time for a change, especially at the AG's office. It's been in the hands of the Democrats far too long, and I think, and she's a very good example of the politicization of that office. I'd like to ask you something that a little bit different. With regard to your past, and you spent 13 years in Washington, what did you bring with you from what you learned or what kinds of things can you?
Sure, what an incredible experience, I'll tell you. Coming from my background and just going down to Washington, D.C. I'm like I said, I was a graduate of, I'm very proud graduate of Georgetown Law. And I served on the law review. We had a criminal procedure journal. We also had it as part of the law review. I got a very high quality education, legal education, that suited me very well. It's none of my immediate family had ever gone to law school, or my extended family for that matter. I was the first lawyer in my family sphere, and it was like fish to water. So I love the law, plain and simple. I love the law. The best decision I ever made was to go to law school. I'm very passionate about it. Intellectually, across the spectrum, I love the law. I always have from my first class. But then, I went into private practice. Two law firms. I was at two law firms. One was a smaller firm, high quality firm, and I was a litigator. I worked as a litigator, and federal courts, mostly intellectual property law cases. Also some business cases. I had a constitutional law case that involved, it was a pro bono case. It involved that the DC had, they had put a certain voting day during Rosh Hashanah, and so we represented a rabbi in a temple to say that was a violation of their constitutional rights. And so it was a great experience. And then I went on to another firm called Latham & Watkins, which is a global firm, has about 2,000 lawyers, a lot bigger than the firm that I had worked at before. So just a lot of, and I worked with some of the best lawyers in the country, worked against some of the best lawyers in the country, been to trial, prep witnesses, many depositions, grinding it out into heavy litigation, high stakes litigation. Some markets were multi-billion-dollar cases. So a lot of great training and experience that I got down in DC. And so when I came back, I founded a practice, but then I ran for Congress for the first couple of years that I came back. And so I have a experience of a significant campaign under my belt. And beyond that, when it comes to, I was appointed to serve. I'm on the board of Massachusetts Maritime Academy. And so I serve on the board, and I'm a vice chairman of the board, and that's a great public service experience that I've had. So I went a little beyond your initial question because I'm used to being on the campaign trail, so I apologize.
It all adds up to who you are, and and I think that's all very, very good.
But just to add, just so in terms of background, so I have a number of different perspectives that I come at this office with. I'm not in one narrow area. I come at it from someone who was born and raised in Massachusetts, who loves Massachusetts, who worked to put his way through school. I understand what it's like to run a business, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a very unique viewpoint to bring to the table here with the Office of
Do you
Attorney General.
currently practice law?
I do, yeah. I have a firm that I founded, and we have an office in Boston, and we also have a DC office.
Very good.
So
Good.
If you don't mind me getting back to this just for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pat, you might remember back in the 80s, I think there was a poll taken of people living in Massachusetts that they felt the state was corrupt and that they had no hope of ever changing.
I do remember that. Yeah.
So I think the change today has been they're just accepting it. Well, it's the way the government works. It's the way it's always worked.
Yeah, but is that?
But is there a way to change the mind of people that we can have an honest state again?
vote
Not
vote
corrupt.
me for Attorney General. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. Like
I know, yeah.
if I can bring that kind of change. I'm not in anybody's pocket, and I believe in what I'm doing. I wouldn't do this if I didn't believe in it, and I won't waver from my principles, and I will I'm an honest guy. I'm going to go in there and do the job, and that includes, and that primarily is enforcing our laws. And I will do the job, and that's how you do it, though. The way you do it is, and there are other also high quality candidates that we have that are running that are going for seats. And we have the Senate race, in U.S. Senate race. Let's get a change there. Why? What is this one party rule? Why are we? Because that's what breeds corruption. A single party that isn't checking each other, that's what breeds corruption. And so we can change it if we vote the right people into office. That's how you do it.
It just amazes me when they, that one party has been in power, and just one simple example: the pay raise that was just voted by the House for themselves. I think it was I don't know, 20-25% increase in for all of the members of the General Court, and there was no opposition to it. I think half dozen Republican people stood up, or most of them stood up against it, but to no avail. It boggles my mind that people can continually vote the same people in and then complain about what it. We do need someone new. We do need someone who is honest. We do need someone who is going to go in and take the politics out of that particular office. I agree with you completely, not because you're here and as a candidate, but with the concept that you're putting forth. How does your wife feel about it?
She's very supportive of what I'm doing, and she knows that I believe in what I'm doing, and that's all.
And you've told her that if you are elected, how busy you will be.
Yes, absolutely. Pretty busy now too.
You're pretty busy now, I'm sure. Yeah.
She is too.
Yeah. Your dad is still living.
Yes.
I'm sure your family is supportive of.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure my dad's making calls for me right now.
Really?
Yeah,
That's great.
My
That's
family's
great.
very supportive.
Yeah. Is he located in Carver still?
He's in Carver, yeah.
Go ahead.
How many
Larry, I'm sorry.
signatures did you need to collect, and how are you doing with that?
The requirement for Attorney General is 10,000 signatures, and we're out grinding it out like everybody else every day. But we're on track. We're on track, and but it's not an easy task, and so it takes a lot of volunteers, and we're it's a daily thing, and just like any other candidate. But the other statewide candidates, the governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general are required to collect 10,000 signatures. And as you know, you need to collect more than that because they're not all acceptable to the town clerks. And then the other constitutional offices are required to collect 5,000. And then I think Congress is required to collect 2,500. So it's a big lift, but it's something that we were very well aware of from the very beginning, and that we confronted early on, and we're doing well.
Well, best wishes with that. If we can help out, let us know.
Thank you.
Let me bring up a name and ask if the Attorney General of Massachusetts could have done something different. Justina Pelletier. Do you remember that name?
I do.
Is there anything the Attorney General could have done to change the outcome of that case with the protective services?
I think the Attorney General's office does a lot of things that the Attorney General's office can do in that area and other areas. I think it always comes back to the same question. I mean, you see something that's wrong, and you want your leaders to do what's right, right? And I think so. With that case, with many other cases, the Attorney General's office certainly has a role to play, and you want that leader to make things to make things right, and we deserve that.
Do you feel it was handled wrong, that case, or not sure?
I'd have to look at more of the facts of that case to really make a judgment call. There are so many other, which I know it's very important. I mean, there's a lot of cases that we've seen, but to make a judgment call, there's so many other areas that we've been focusing on, but I wouldn't answer that unless I really dug in.
I think you could have just won the election if you said that you would have done something different.
Okay.
But look into that for me if you could, and
I will.
I appreciate you getting back to this show and letting us know what you've come up with.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
If you can fit it into your schedule, we appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's great. So there's another gentleman that's also running for the Republican slot on the Attorney General, and I was wondering how you differ with him. Jay McMahon, I think is his name. So are you pretty much on the same page as Jay McMahon, or are there definite differences between you two?
I think in terms of policy, I think most people in the Republican Party will share in terms of issues, like for the most part. I know that I've met Jay during the campaign. I've heard his speeches. He's frustrated with the current state of affairs as well, and so I think there's a lot of things that we have in common in that respect.
It sounds like either one of you will not have any problem supporting the other person if they won the primary.
That's correct. Exactly, 100%. If
and
whoever
you probably
whoever
work for one another too.
Yes, whoever the nominee is, yeah.
So are there any differences that you know of at this point? Any reason why you would be the better candidate, Dan?
Well, I think my strength and difference is both on experience and in terms of message. Okay, so with respect to experience, we talked about it. I have the passion for the people in our Commonwealth. Very strong ties to Massachusetts. Very passionate about it. And I think that's very, very important. I also have a high quality legal experience in terms of my education. Also the stakes of the cases that I've worked on. And I'm a member of the bar of the Supreme Court of the United States. I've submitted a brief to the Supreme Court, an amicus brief.
Oh.
I'm an author of a brief that I submitted to the Supreme Court. So I think my background is very strong, and I also have my own law practice now after the congressional race. So I run my own business. I have good values, and I'm a hard worker. I'm in my prime, and I'm ready to help the people of Massachusetts. And I also have the experience on the Mass Maritime Board of Trustees, where I've overseen a budget of over $50 million, which exceeds that from the Attorney General's office. My experience in D.C. at a law firm with over 2,000 lawyers, a very large institution. The AG's office, 200 lawyers, so at an even a larger. So I have a very strong legal background, good values. So I think my experience is unique in that respect. And also, I have experience and understanding of cybersecurity and within intellectual property law. I've got some of that in my background. And so, the threats of the 21st century, we need to be ready and prepared for our cyber threats, and that's part of public safety. So with respect to experience, that's one thing. But then my message, I'm the only candidate in this race that is talking about reforming the Attorney General's office and getting politics out of that office to return it to what its true purpose is. And so, and that message has resonated with independents, certainly conservatives, even Kennedy Democrats, Reagan Democrats, and so the message is very strong. And I think, someone who's going to bring change, who's going to disrupt the status quo, I think for all those reasons, that's the candidacy that I bring to the table, and so that's my answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
If your policies are in accord with the president, the current president, would you support him And for example, I'm thinking in terms of the wall, which has become such a big issue. I personally think that it is a good issue. I think it's one that should be fulfilled.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about it. You know, Massachusetts first,
Sure.
without any doubt. But at some point, I'm sure that some of these is going to leak over into federal issues. Yeah, you know, the
Okay.
state is going to have to respond one way or another.
Okay, so you're talking about the whether there's support for the wall or not? Is that what?
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously, as the Attorney General, okay, I'll say as the Attorney General in Massachusetts, there's not a direct. I don't see there's not a direct effect
To the
of
wall.
except for the fact of.
Well, I'm thinking of illegal
Well,
immigration.
that's right. Except for the fact that it will deter illegal immigration,
Right.
which is a very good thing. And so, in terms of the, you know, I think we noticed when you had a president that was willing to say, I want to enforce the laws, the influx of illegal immigrants coming from the southern border really reduced significantly.
Yes.
And that's because there's a law enforcement signal that's coming that's saying we're not going to, you know, we're not going to put up with this anymore. So I think that's good. I think that's good for Massachusetts. And so, but I don't want to diminish the issue of illegal immigration because the people in Massachusetts really care about that issue. It's very important. We need to enforce our immigration laws. We need to enforce all of our laws, and we need to have leaders in place that will do that. So,
Do you think that with regard to the other states, the New England states, I'm not sure of exactly what happens with, for example, the current AG. Is there any interchange with regard to particular laws that affect both states or most states? Is that part of what goes on in the AG's office? I mean, they constantly in contact with, for example, illegal immigration, you know, checking their policies and finding out what they're doing about it. I think it's a tough job. I think it's an extremely, because it covers everything.
yeah.
It literally covers every
does.
single. That was the reason for my question earlier with regard to, you know, how are you informed about the problems? Is it your staff of lawyers each area that looks into automatically, or do they wait for the phone to ring and find out that there's a problem here?
Well, I mean, certainly, you know, it can come from any multiple source. You know, like with the public corruption issue, you've got someone coming in and blowing a whistle in terms of public corruption. When you talk about fraud, like healthcare fraud, there are you know, whistleblower statutes that give an incentive for people to, like from maybe a major healthcare organization is committing fraud, and there's an incentive for a whistleblower to come from under the shadows and reach out to either a private attorney or the Attorney General's office. You've got evidence from what's happening in the Commonwealth of, you know, people dying from fentanyl, you know, for example, or other crimes being committed, reports coming in. And so, you know, as the outsider, the reformer to come in, I don't have, I've never sat in that seat. I mean, that's what I'm going to running for. So I can't tell you firsthand what that sitting Attorney General does or what the previous ones have done. I've talked to previous Attorney General, but it you know, you won't, I don't know firsthand, but I you know, the based on the information that I have, it comes from multiple sources, and you have to be ready. You have to be ready to address the problems, to fix the problems. You have to be ready to make good judgments as to how those resources are going to be used to help the people of Massachusetts. And so, sort of all the above.
I can imagine being overwhelmed on any Monday morning with issues that, you know, across the state. And this is a big state.
Yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of problems.
Especially because people take everyday corruption as an everyday thing now, and they just feel
They're
it's
used to
normal.
it.
So
They accept it.
You have to
that's
have a good
tremendous
team.
job.
You have to have a good team of people. There's no one that's going to come to the office of Attorney General that has every single skill. You know, that you have to have people. You have to build a good team around you in order to administer the laws of the Commonwealth properly, and that's what I will
That's all
do.
true.
That's step one. Is to build that. Is to have that team, put that team together. so that we can administer the laws.
We wanted to give you a couple minutes to speak, but if I could just do a quick lightning round.
Sure.
Just give me your thoughts on this topic.
Yep.
That'll be important for for everybody electing Attorney General. Your thoughts on the Second Amendment?
I support the Second Amendment. I'm a gun owner. I am against what this Attorney General did in 2016, which was to essentially make her own law with the rifle ban. It was wrong. It was wrong from a viewpoint of the Second Amendment. It was even worse. It was wrong from a viewpoint of the separation of powers. When the Attorney General did what she did, it generated her own law, and that is, she faced rebuke from the legislature, not only from Republicans, but also high-ranking Democrats that said, you're not supposed to do that. You enforce the laws. We are the ones that create the laws. And so I would revoke that guidance if I were elected.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's just move on with the marijuana laws.
Personally,
It's currently being written still.
well, right. Personally, I was not in favor of the legalization of marijuana, but I also understand that we have a system of government, and there are certain laws that are in place now, and that's the way it is right now. But I say, as the Attorney General, when it comes to public safety, that implementation of the law needs to be continually assessed to determine what effect is this legalization having to issues like public safety. And if we start to see negative things start to happen, like is happening in Colorado, then then the law needs to be changed. Enforcement activity needs to be changed, and so
Then the Attorney General needs to step in and say this is a public health safety, and you don't get off because you were high in this in this tragic accident.
We need to have analysis for if someone's operating under the influence of marijuana. I mean, my understanding is there's no applicable or implemented breathalyzer type test, which probably wouldn't be your breath, but it would be something else for marijuana. We need to have that to keep our streets safe.
We have about 45 seconds.
Traffic, yeah.
If you could talk to our audience in Burlington and beyond about why you'd like to become Attorney General
Sure.
and what your priorities would be.
Yeah, I didn't realize
Sure.
the time.
Again, so my candidacy is a reform candidacy, okay? And so it's been 50 years that the office of Attorney General has been in the hands of a single party. We need to reform that office to get politics out of that office and return our Attorney General's office to what it's supposed to be, and that's an institution that enforces our laws to protect the people of Massachusetts. That's what I will provide as the next Attorney General. I ask for your vote we have a convention coming up, a Republican convention. If you're going to be a delegate, I ask for your vote there. We have a primary. I ask for your vote in the primary, and certainly I ask for your vote in the general election. To learn more about me and the campaign, please visit our website. It's danshores.com. That's my name, danshores.com. There you can find information about the campaign, about me, and then also ways that you could possibly help through either volunteering or donating to the campaign.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming on
Gentlemen,
tonight,
thank
sharing
you.
your views.
Appreciate it.
Terrific.
And if we can help out, you let
Good
us know.
job.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah.
much. I really.
How can we
It
help?
was a joy.
Anything in particular that we can do? Contributions are always accepted, I'm sure. But
Contributions are always accepted.
always accepted, yeah.
I think all
Spread the word.
I think all the
the word,
cameras
yeah.
are off, but
As a matter of fact, I
haven't
was
seen
going to
any.
ask you if I only got this one.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you have any with you. If you have a chance to send some to me, I
Mark, bumper
distribute them.
stickers.
Yeah, we
Pat?
can send some to you, Pat.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have a few,
Sure.
6, 7, 8, I can distribute them to people that I do know in the area.
Why don't you
I'll
just-
get you a cop.
I
I'm
think
sorry.
we better just say goodbye to the audience because I think we saw.
Oh,
an
I'm sorry.
article.
I thought we were off there already.
I thought we were too. But
To
then I
those
saw
of you who
someone
are still
saying-
watching, thank